If you write code, if you type code today, it's not necessary.
Neither of you have been writing code as much or at all.
At all.
Jeroen Gordijn and Jeroen Day, two real frontrunners, join me to discuss why you should stop coding right now. How do you implement Spec-driven development? What is Dark Factory? What does an agentic company look like to you?
We were simply running out of ideas like, oh shoot, what should we build next? We did everything, right? So what's next? So it's free cocaine?
Train's going. And I want to jump on that train and I don't want to wave it goodbye when it just departs the station and I'm left behind and it's like, sorry, you're no longer necessary because you don't know how to work with these kind of tools.
And people can still hop on? Is the craft of software engineering, is it dying? Is it dead? Where is it going from your perspective?
Not software engineering, but software development, I think is already solved, so to say.
Yeah.
I think that if you write code, if you type code today, it's not necessary.
That's the difference for you between software development and software engineering?
Yeah, because you have to do some engineering, right? So if you create an application, where do you store your artifacts? Where do you store your assets? Well, what do you want? How do you want it to work? Do you use Azure Cloud or Amazon Cloud? Or what do you want to use? How do you want to set it up? Stuff like that still matter, right? Do I want to integrate with what system? That's the engineering part. But the writing of the code, no longer necessary.
How long has that been the case?
I think it's solved since Opus 4.5.
Yeah.
The 24th of November last year.
You know the exact date.
Yes.
Yeah. Which means that neither of you have been writing code as much or at all.
At all.
At all.
I stopped in September, October.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then it was
early.
difficult because then I noticed myself really typing, you see that file? On line 12, you need to change that.
Okay.
So it was a learning process. It was not optimal, of course, but it learned me how these AIs work. And from that, now I can do it completely automatic.
Yeah. How's that for you, Jeroen?
Yeah, exactly the same way. So I haven't really written a line of code since somewhere last year, I would say. And it's what Jeroen says, like the engineering part, it will go to an abstraction level higher, right? And you will think about concepts and how these concepts can be implemented. But looking at, I saw that you have quite some Go experience, for instance.
Yeah.
So I like Go as much as you do.
Okay.
I would say.
Yeah.
But going into the language and having all the specifics about the syntax and stuff like that, that's not really relevant anymore in that sense. Yeah.
I was reading Reddit actually on my way here. I love reading Reddit because there's a lot of things going on specifically. And there was a narrative of when you submit a pull request, now that people are no longer writing code, should you still understand the code specifically that the agent has generated for you when you submit a pull request? Because for me, that is a thought that in theory sounds good. But when we generate more and more code, like volume becomes quite quickly accessible to a lot of people. And when we're talking about an individual, you can already work in quite a big volume. But when we're then looking at a team, it's going to be quite challenging understanding all of what you've generated so far.
Yeah, correct.
So I'm curious to hear what you think.
Yeah, so my team, so I try to advocate within my team for everybody to use the agents, especially the coding agents. And I think we are succeeding quite a bit. Even my product owner is writing the code. And what we saw was that the amount of pull requests were ramping up quite quickly. And so we were becoming the bottleneck, right?
Yeah, the humans.
The humans who need to, and then we're getting these really large pull requests, etc. So I think it all depends on also the risks that is involved. And if we are doing certain things and drafting certain pull requests that have a lot of risks associated with them, we will have a look as humans. But there are quite a lot of things which are, they're okay, not really relevant, and don't have an enormous amount of risk associated with them. I think it's less of an idea to have multiple people read these pull requests, right? And so what I would rather see is that we invest quite a lot of time and exploration in trying to also have the agents review the software in that case and automate that as much as possible. And have a little bit of a step in towards like the dark factory way of manufacturing software.
What is dark factory?
Yeah, that's it's a term that we saw that we read about a while ago, and the analogy would be that within a normal factory, you would have the lights on because humans are working there and they need to see and do it in order to produce stuff. And in a dark factory where the robots would be working, you won't really have a need for lights. So they switch off the lights, so it's a dark factory.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And what would be very interesting is having some kind of input towards the dark factory, and then the software would be the output, right? And we're now trying to investigate like how can we do that within our department. Yeah.
Is that the same what you've seen, Jeroen? That code reviews is becoming the bottleneck, and the humans are part of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And with the improving quality of the models, it also becomes less of a problem, right? So the quality becomes better. I notice now that still there's a lot of experience in creating the code, right? If you give it a different prompt, you might... So if you just vibe coding and fire away, then you get code. But is it the code that really aligns with your code base? But over time, it gets better and better. And if you give it more feedback and do investigation and spec it up front, you get a better end result. And then I noticed that I'm starting to look less and less at the code because I think it's already good. So if I look at it and see, there's nothing to see here. Normally only the input was maybe wrong. I spec'd it incorrectly. So I really need to look at what was the input and how can I prove that it works? Because the code is not important. It's the end result that matters, right? Does it work? And that's what we should focus on.
Well, the code not being important, for me, code has always needed to be simple and easy to change. In essence, I still want that in my generated code because otherwise at some point I'm just going into a bottleneck that is code and change faster. So I still want kind of good and healthy conventions in place. And do you capture that through specs, or what are your conventions and how do you capture that?
I wonder how that's going in the future, right? Because if you have the specs of what the software is, why do you care for the code quality if you can throw it away and rebuild it immediately?
I hope I can. Like that's the ambition. But so far, would we be able to throw away a full code base if we have it spec'd out and then regenerate it? I would love to do
not yet. But if you're working spec-driven, then it becomes more of an option.
Yeah.
Right?
Let's explain what spec-driven means, because I feel like we're stacking capabilities. We have the model, then we have a harness around that, which builds some conventions and checks and balances in place. And now we have ways of working on top of that, which spec-driven development is one of them.
Yeah. So you can just open your harness and say, okay, build me this feature, go, right? And then it's like throwing a dart at the board. Maybe you'll hit the bullseye, but probably not, right? But the end result can be really nice or not what you want, and you have to change it. And you can iterate over that. Or you can think up front and really specify what you want as an end result. And if you can do that, then the dart will be more close to the bullseye, right?
It will be more close? When it's not close, will you just try again? Or what's your way of working?
No. So it's like with humans, right? You can never spec 100% perfect. It's always you spec it, you make it, then you check it, and you think, oh, I forgot this. Or a colleague comes along and he says, well, what about this situation? And then you have to adapt for that. So that's what I mean. You will not immediately hit the bullseye. But if you spec it, then you get the closest to your target. So.
Yeah. How do you implement spec-driven development? Do you use one of the frameworks out there? Do you just use your thoughts in a markdown file? Do you have a way of working that works well within your environment or your team's environment so far?
Well, we have tried different frameworks. Jeroen, so there was this framework by GitHub. There was Spec-Kit, right? Yeah. And then one of the downsides of Spec-Kit would be that it would generate a lot of markdown files. Okay. It's like the wall of text, right? That everybody's referring to. And it's basically too much for people to actually consume. And well, at least for me. I cannot speak for the whole entirety, but okay, just for me. And then at one moment in time, Jeroen found out about OpenSpec. And this is like a nice middle ground between the artifacts that it will actually create and generate and for us to review and check and see if we missed anything, if this is the correct direction, etc. Beforehand, I was using Beats quite a lot by Steve Jegge, way back. And then basically using the plan mode of the agents, Cloud Code had a plan mode, etc. And then converting that plan mode into Beats items that then can be implemented. But right now, we've settled upon using OpenSpec, and it will create like a proposal in which you will see the idea behind the change that you want to make. It will have a design document as well, which sort of with a part that sort of reflects the architectural decision records type of information in that. And then you will have the specs itself. And the specs itself, it looks a little bit like Gherkin, Gherkin, I would say. And it's writing down these rules in human readable format of what the software should be able to do, and which is very nice. And what's also very nice is the moment that you are actually done with the specific change, and you will say, we're done, we're going to archive this. It will merge the specs towards, if there were specs already, towards those specs, if it's changed, if it's added, if it's modified, etc. So over time, you will have a set of written down behaviors that the software product should comply with. And this is very interesting because this is something that we, as humans, are also very bad at, right? Keeping a track of what the thing should actually do. I don't know if you've ever encountered a software project in which documentation was always on par.
No, it's never there. No one wants to do it as well.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? And one of the things right now is that you can have a look at like the business requirements which are there, and the software should be there. And that's very interesting. And for me, at least, and I think for Jeroen as well, right now, it's very good a basis to start from using these open specs, so to say, and the artifacts that will create and generate the software. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So then,
if that's clear enough.
Yeah, I think so. Can any team, if they have an existing code base, adopt this way of working? So you don't have to do it from scratch necessarily.
Yes. No. A lot of people think, I need to do this from scratch. The many questions we get is, do I have to first reverse engineer all the specifications before I can start?
Do I make the Omega spec of what is there?
But that's not necessary. You can just immediately start. In the beginning, I started in a team, and I was the only one using this. And I could just use it. And more people started using it, and now we all use it. But it's not necessary. So just start with it. And then later on, if you find the need, you can always reverse engineer all the specs. Yeah. But in the beginning, just start with OpenSpec. The spec part, and then implementing that already gives you so much benefit.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. And the existing code is just not spec'd, and that's fine, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Because the models are so good, they already start investigating your code base and figure out, I see that this is already there and there. I see this file there, and then it knows how to start writing it.
I want to zoom into the difference between model and harness and your experience in there, because I feel like models have incrementally improved. I was a fan of Opus. Now I'm really fan of kind of Codex, because I feel like they improved quite a lot compared to Opus that has not improved as much. But then also the harness matters. Like if I use either model in GitHub Copilot versus the native, let's say native company harnesses, Codex or Cloud Code specifically, I do notice a difference. But time is limited. So I cannot do exactly what I'm doing in kind of a scientific way with all the harnesses. What are your thoughts so far? Do models matter more than harnesses nowadays? Or is this trend of harnesses mattering more also what you're seeing? It's the models.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The harnesses do matter, of course. For instance, with the harness, especially if you get like one of the harnesses by one of the frontier labs, they will provide you with, for instance, a system prompt, right? And with each new release, they can also tweak the system prompt a little bit. And that would also mean that it will impact the behavior, right? But in the end, most of I would say more than 90% of the work that will actually be done by the LLM itself, right?
Yeah, all the work actually, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the model that does it, and the harness only gives it hand and feet so that it can actually get out of the box. Otherwise, it's just sending text back and front, right? So giving it tools to change code on your machine, that's what the harness is. And then each harness can have its own prompt to give different behavior. That's what you probably notice. And they may have different thought about, okay, how should the edit tool work and stuff like that. But most of the work comes from the model.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And there's a lot of fluff and marketing.
What's really interesting is to there's a man-in-the-middle proxy.
Yeah.
Put that in between and look at what's going over the wire. It's so interesting. And then you see, well, it's nothing special.
Yeah.
What have you noticed when you put that in the middle?
There's only text going back and front.
Yeah.
And it's actually quite simple. There's a system prompt that puts in just the specifications from your harness, like in Pi, you're the Pi coding agent. And OpenCode says something like you're the best coding agent in the world, stuff like that. And there's also some description about how it should behave, always make sure you understand the user, stuff like that, right? So that will matter whether it will just go or ask a question, stuff like that. That's behavior change you might notice, but also something you might be able to change yourself. It puts the agents MD from the users folder in there and your agents MD from your project in there. And that's all in there. And the skills that are. That's the system prompt that gets sent with it. And then your own message.
Yeah.
And then next to it, all the tools it can use. So
Exactly.
for Pi, it's quite simple. We use Pi, the harness. It has just 4 tools right now. So it's like edit, read file, write file, so creating a file, and bash. That's it. That's all the tools it gives to the harness. And then it can do everything. And for OpenCode, it's more involved because they also have this question tool, so that it can ask you questions, and you can add tools to it, either via MCP or just via extensions.
Yeah.
But then it's just text back and forth. So you send a question, how many files are in my folder, to the agent or to the model, and the model doesn't know, right? So what it does is just, I have the bash tool, so I can do an ls. So it sends back, use the bash tool, do an ls on your machine. And your harness will just perform that and send back, okay, this is the output. And then the model can see, okay, I see 7 files. And then it can make a response. Oh, I looked at your folder and there are 7 files in your folder.
Is a harness comparable to an IDE? Because both you mentioned you use Pi, and Pi, if both you use it, that is some form of preference compared to one of the Frontier Labs or one of the other open source ones. Is it comparable?
I gave this a little bit of thought this morning, anticipating. So if certain functionalities from an IDE, for instance, are actually built in underlying CLI tools, right? For instance, in Visual Studio Code, you would have the Go Please LSP, right? But in effect, it's a process that will run also in the terminal. So a lot of these types of functionalities that will support writing software that you would normally have in an IDE can be actually used and called within an agent, right?
Yeah.
If they have, for instance, access to bash, etc. So yeah, in that sense, yes, I would say so.
That's what it feels like, because what I've seen so far is that there's a lot of, I think, varied opinions. And for the people that haven't tried it, if they do try it, they fall in love with, I feel like, their first harness. And for the majority of time, especially early this year, late last year, specifically the harness Claude Code was what people fell in love with.
Me too.
And then me too. And it's very hard to then be like, oh, do I let go of this? Do I try other things? Someone has to take you out and be like, actually, things have evolved.
Yeah.
And experimentation matters. But in the end, if people are comfortable where they are, comparable to an IDE, for example, my first one was Visual Studio Code. I also didn't want to switch to IntelliJ, but I had to because of some of the plugins that they offered. I feel like harnesses are quite comparable. And I have noticed people are less and less in their IDE and more in their terminal.
Correct.
With their favorite harness.
Yeah, there was
a
a presentation last year, I think it was Jeroen, right? About the IDE, is that.
Oh yeah, the AI, the engineer.
That your environment, like IntelliJ, you don't need it anymore, right? So indeed, in that sense, you can say, okay, your Pi, OpenCode, Claude Code, that's your IDE now, right now. The thing with the IDEs from Anthropic and Codex is that they are tied to their own product, right? And there are ways to a little bit move around it, but they're really geared towards their own product. That's why I fell in love with open code, because it's much more open. And then Pi, same thing. But I fell in love with Pi because it's more simple.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, all the fluff is gone. And now I see it's really the model.
Yeah. But you were describing an interesting aspect, and that's that the moment that people will or have devised a setup for themselves that apparently works for them, they are plateauing, right? And they're very comfortable, and apparently this gives good results. And there is no incentive to explore further. And indeed, because we are limited in time, right? What we can do every day.
Well, also how history has kind of gone, right? You find your way of working and then that's it. I think reality is that things just evolve also very quickly. That's on top of what you mentioned.
Yeah. Correct. But that is very interesting. And I do think that we should explore more, especially in this day and age of all these new different developments that are taking place. I mean, so I come also from a C# background. We were using Visual Studio, right? Before Visual Studio Code came along. And it will take quite a long time before a new EDA comes along, et cetera, but we don't have that luxury anymore. So we need to explore more what is happening. And the moment that we get stuck, we need to step back and have a broader view. Like, so we, myself personally, I've plateaued. Now what? What can we do now? And that's very important. And that's something I don't see happening that much with other colleagues. No.
Yeah, I spoke with Adi Osmani, this was a couple of weeks ago, and he mentioned kind of the time that you have, the free time that you have, could be time you spend on innovation. And then you can compare it to, you have a few innovation budget tokens. Then the question is, this token that I have, it's limited, right? I only get maybe one a day or one a week, depending on how much free time I have. Where do I spend this token on? I feel like for people that are not doing any type of agentic tooling, it would be that to start off with and spend it, because I don't think you're going to immediately get it. Like that takes time specifically. And then for the people that fell in love with Cloud Code, it might be jumping on a new harness. It might be trying to figure out how to not do it on your machine, but on a remote machine. There's a lot of ways to experiment nowadays.
Yeah.
What would be the kind of gradual approach, and how would you kind of continuously go more in depth from your both perspective? I don't know who wants to take it first though.
If I would spend any time, and it depends on what your level already is, but I think it's more interesting to see what the different models bring to the table and how they work differently than spending your time with trying different agent harnesses. Right?
Gotcha.
Codex, Claude, Open Code, they're all fine. But it's really more interesting to see if I have this problem and I give it to Claude or I give it to a Codex model. What's the difference? What do I see? For instance, if you do front end, you see that Opus is way better at front end than the GPT models. But for back end, I find the GPT models better nowadays than Opus. But also, there are a lot of Chinese models coming. And depending what you think about the Chinese models, but still, it's interesting to see how quickly they evolve and what they bring to the table.
I like that. Yeah.
And to answer your question, from my perspective, like one of the things is that people need to find a spark inside of them that will trigger them to actually want to perform these explorations, whatever the in depth might be. But they need to find some kind of intrinsic motivation to want to invest time, personal time, albeit if you want to have the tokens, etc., that you want to spend these tokens on the new AI developments. But that's very important. That's also why I'm very. So we also provide workshops and stuff like that, and there are always a couple of people there attending who have this fire inside of them, right? This enthusiastic behavior and curiosity to explore this kind of new technology, and that's super interesting. Like, how can we get that specific spark that these people have and try to convey that towards other people? And that's very hard to do.
But if you have that 1 token suddenly becomes 10.
Yeah.
Because you get it from your sleep,
Exactly.
your hobbies,
Yes.
everything goes away. And this is the most important thing.
Yeah, that's becoming unhealthy. But yeah.
I've heard people even say, because of the kind of budget that we get, right? If I do a Cloud Code Max subscription, I get subsidized way more than if I would do pay as you go.
Yeah.
So people think time is limited and they can build all of a sudden way quicker. And building is some form of satisfaction, some form of dopamine. And some people have described it to me as kind of an addiction, right? The time that I don't spend building, I should actually be building, because time is limited. And maybe in a year or so, I cannot build as much anymore.
Yes.
And I want to learn now as fast as I can.
Yeah. Now's the time.
Yeah.
Now's the time, right?
Yeah. So we follow also this guy like Jeffrey Hundley and the father of the Ralph loop. And he also said, all these projects that you wanted to do when you when you retire, that's all possible now. So all these ideas, and at one moment in time, we need also to have these ideas to explore, like all the different variables that are at play, right? Like for instance, what Jeroen was describing, like important variables are like the different LLMs that you can use, but also the reasoning levels and the different harnesses, etc. But you need to have these ideas to actually be able to explore, right? And we were simply running out of ideas, like, oh shit, what should we build next? Like we did everything, right? So what's next? And so every time I get like this new idea, I'm really happy. But then also, and right now I'm a little bit more calm space, but I also would have these moments that in the middle of the night I would wake up, I would have like 10 ideas in my head and I couldn't get back to sleep. Like, okay, I need to build this now. But that has passed now, thankfully.
Okay.
Yeah. That was a real problem. Yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah, apparently it was worldwide. It was a problem, right? So people were doing research like what's going on with these AI zombie people. And Jeroen spoke about this together with one of the high Microsoft people. I forgot his name. Scott. Okay, I forgot his name. But apparently it was a thing. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there's also always one more prompt, right? So I need to go to bed, but just one more prompt and then I go to bed. And then it's working and it finishes and I have to respond to this.
Yeah.
And you can never go to the toilet without starting the agent because you always want it to be running, right? And that gives a burden, that gives pressure.
Yeah. I feel like this is how it started. And especially in some of the people I talk to or some of the organizations I know of, cost is becoming a bigger and bigger factor. Also a narrative online, this is now possible because things are subsidized, but what if compute limits hit and then et cetera, it might not be available anymore.
Yeah.
And that last part, I don't know if I agree with, but I'm curious to hear what you think, right? Right now, I feel like we are being enabled by the frontier models, by the organizations, by I think the cost factor, and right now it's doable very much, especially for the individual, a little bit less for enterprises, but especially still doable. Where's this going?
I heard that the Anthropic and OpenAI would be in the black figures if they stop training. So they earn money on the inferencing already.
Yeah. Which means they should be able to just keep things stable.
Yeah, well, and look at DeepSeek. It came by and it has a really reduced cost. So I don't think that it will become more and more expensive. I don't believe that. And I certainly don't believe that it will go away. That's certain. That's just not possible. It's like thinking in 1995, oh, the internet, it's just a thing. It will go away. It will not.
Is it that comparable to you?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, and I think we're even in the same time figure, right? So we're now like where the internet was in 1995. It was just there. People started using it. It was like, oh, this is interesting. Some people still think, what do I need to? Why do I need it for? I can do without.
Yeah,
but it will go faster than the internet, probably. I remember that, yes. Yeah. And this is going. So the developments currently are going faster. Yeah. So it's free cocaine.
Okay.
And then the dealer is gonna take it away or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I was thinking about this as well. Like, is there a possibility in the future that we will look back at this specific period and said, all this technology, we had it back then, but for some reason it's not here anymore.
It's kind of a weird future.
Yeah, that's super weird. Is that going to be the case? I don't really know. I did come across some on X yesterday, some kind of a website that were actually plotting the costs that companies are making right now, and it's not looking for the companies training the LLMs. It's not like they're all making a loss at this moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
The only the biggest company that actually was making quite a profit was, of course, Nvidia.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So Nvidia is, of course, making a lot of profit, and then I said something, and Jeroen didn't agree, and
he just cut you off.
He cut me off, like physically. No, so that's interesting. No, and then looking into the future, that we have some kind of possibility to have better control over the LLMs itself, right? So right now we're very, very much dependent on of course the frontier model companies. But the moment that we can actually run the LLMs somewhere, albeit on your super maxed out laptop, or somewhere on a VPS that you can host yourself or something like that, that would be wonderful. Yes.
Does it already make sense for people to start experimenting with this on their local machine or somewhere else?
Yeah. You can do it, right?
You can do it, but it depends on where you are.
Is it valuable?
Don't start with that. So I also see a lot of people that are just using GPT 5.2 or Opus 4.5 because it's cheaper. But you're cutting yourself, right, in your learning process, because there are way better models. And then people start using an old model, like, doesn't work. Yeah, of course not, because we're already way past it. So yeah, you hurt yourself in doing that. Same thing for the local models. Local models are really cool that they are here. They're getting better and better, but experiment with them. If you know what to look for, if you want to do something specific, just by all means. But don't try and think like, okay, it's almost as good as Opus 4.7 or GPT 5.5.
Yeah. And to add a little bit more nuance, so it would be, I would say, yes, do it, because it will describe the contrast between the very, very good models and the stuff that you can do locally, right?
Okay, so that's the learning.
Yeah. Like learn how to set up how to run a model locally. I would say that's valuable knowledge, but also to check and see what the output is as compared towards like the real high quality frontier models, right? And also the speed, of course. Like if we're going, the new Google model, the 3.5 Flash, which is really quickly, right? I don't know.
In theory.
Like 150 tokens per second, etc. That stuff counts. And if you do it locally still, even with, and you will get bad outputs, that's not usable for production code, for instance. You will see why, the difference and the gap, and why it will probably take a lot of time still.
Yeah. So it's the funny thing that kind of AI-assisted development, as well as kind of using models in production. Right now, from a model perspective, they are interwoven. And one was first. We were always using, or we will in an earlier stage, using models in production for end-user functionality. And now we have AI-assisted development tooling. And there, it doesn't make sense to use 5.2 versus a 5. Whatever we have now. Same with Opus 4.7 versus the older ones. Unless you notice kind of degrading behavior in the higher numbers. But let's say the highest numbers are the best models, then it doesn't make any sense. But previously, using models in production for customer-facing applications, there it does make sense, which is why they are available in the first place.
Yes.
So you really need this knowledge of, okay, where do I use which model and where is it relevant? And for people that are now starting, it might make sense to indeed look at lower models for your own development workflow. But if you actually know what you're doing, then you might shoot yourself in the foot. Which is
and there's a big difference between, are we gonna employ AI or an LLM for a proposition within a product, as opposed to what we are primarily focusing on is AI driven development. Yeah,
exactly.
Yes.
How much have you experimented with going out of your local machine? And also then I'm wondering, kind of within your workflow, within teams, because right now I'm quite confined within my laptop, for example, but I would love to run things. And I feel like that's also the path to scale. That would be enabling scale if you don't run it on your own machine anymore. But for example, somewhere where it can scale, like the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Have you experimented with that?
Yeah, I had an Hetzner setup where I just started sessions. And then this certainly becomes necessary when you want to loop, right? The Ralph loop, you already mentioned that. So you specify first, and then at some point you say, okay, I've written the specs, but now I want to implement this. And OpenSpec has this apply, and you can do that, and it will start writing code, and then it says, oh, finish task 1. And you say, okay, next.
Yeah.
And then it will, and you have to babysit it, and every time say, okay, continue. And your context is growing and growing. But you also have this Ralph loop where you just say, okay, do the first task. Then at the end, your harness will stop and it gets back to your terminal. And then it automatically, in a loop, says, okay, next, continue. And then it starts looping and it finishes the whole thing. And then the next step is putting that in a process, right? Because creating the code is one thing. And that's also where I see a lot of problems arising, that people say, yeah, well, it's created code, I looked at it, it's not what I want. But you can also let the AI review the code that was created, right? So I've written this, or we've written this process where you just say, implement it, then review with GPT, then review with Opus, then review with GPT, review with Opus, until they no longer find any issues. And every time after the review, bring it back to the implementation model you've designed.
Yeah.
After that, then you make the pull request, you deploy it to a test environment, and also make proof that it works. Also, that's part of the whole process where the model makes the proof, and then it still can find, oh, I cannot make the proof because I missed something, right? So
what does proof look like?
Depending on whether it's front end or back end. So front end, it's screenshots of the changes that were made and the flow of the application, so that you can really see, okay, on this page, then the necessary data is filled in, next button is pressed, then save is pressed, and then we get to the overview and it's there, like that, right? And if it's backend, I want to see the request that was done, the JSON or whatever, and the response that's there, so that you can see, okay, it's really how it works, and it makes it really easy to review it, because then you say, okay, this is what I expect, or this is not what I expect.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, then it is like finishing off, putting the pull request in the team, and so it's full hands off after that, right? But if you want that takes a lot of time. And then you probably always need to have your laptop open or delegate it to another environment.
Yes.
Yeah. If we have that, like on paper, I've heard people have that. I've never been in an environment where in my team, when I was still individual contributor, I have had that. But if that works and it works with high quality, and even it reviews itself, so the human pair of eyes could only be potentially on the specifications to see if there was any holes, or maybe even just going through the code. But I think in those volumes, you would not be able to digest even what changed in any case. What is then left for the current engineers that are operating or working within this way of working? What is their responsibility and what do they do?
Yeah. Writing the specs and checking the proof.
Yeah, that. And so I think we're in a engineering phase. So engineering to the power of 2, right? So normally we would be engineering for products, for artifacts, for clients, for whatever business need there is. But right now we also need to engineer the process that enables us to actually engineer those things, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of engineering going into this, like a lot of time. So I think there's an emphasis there also on engineering, like engineering the whole workflow, etc. And indeed going over the specs, etc.
Yeah, certainly right now.
Yeah, but
right?
still, but still the engineering as well, right? Also for the product, what we discussed at the beginning, that's still at play here, but on a higher level.
So then, if I extrapolate this and I amplify it, in what world are we? Is it like dog eat dog? Because I feel like we have a lot of engineers. You used to be able to do a boot camp, then you got a really high paying salary at a company where you might work on a teeny tiny bit of a bigger picture and a bigger puzzle. I feel like that's going away. But are we then competing now for the roles that in the future will only be there? The ones where we engineer and orchestrate kind of agentic workflows? Or is it more of a marathon and some people will just fall off and be like, this new world is not for me. I don't see myself, like I love writing code. I don't like orchestrating agents. What is this world we're in?
If you really like code, then you're in a tough place. Right? If you cannot leave that behind, then this becomes really difficult, because as we said in the beginning, that software development, of the writing code, is solved by the models. So yeah, it doesn't make sense to do that yourself. It's too expensive, because the models can do it cheaper. We talked about it being expensive. But also Jeff Rentley makes a really big point about saying writing code is now cheaper than flipping burgers at McDonald's. Because the model, albeit it being expensive in tokens, it's way cheaper than having a developer writing the same code.
Yeah. Maybe in the future, like people, currently, like I have a colleague who likes to work with wood, creating furniture and stuff like that, like a chair or something. Maybe that will be the future. Like I have this nice,
it's your hobby.
Artisanal project that I want to make, and I'm gonna use all my knowledge to build like the most beautiful syntactic code.
Yeah,
maybe that's a thing. But like for the normal needs that we want to provide through software, and the writing of that code, that solved like last year November. So.
Yeah. I wonder what the impact is going to be on teams, because I have been in very small teams, kind of like a task force where we come in, solve problems, goes quickly. It could be with you two, for example, short lines of communication, we execute quite quickly. And then I've been in bigger teams, and the only reason for it being bigger teams is one could be budget, and the other one could be, the grandeur of the project and like what we aim to achieve and solve. Now, that last reason, how big the project is, does not necessarily need to be a reason to have a big team anymore.
Correct.
I feel like with quite a few individuals, and likely amplified by agents that are quite capable and workflows that we've engineered that are quite capable and have high quality output, you can do a lot with a smaller team.
Yes.
Which means that the overhead of kind of communication people, that is going to go away.
Yep.
So I also wonder if organizations are going to kind of self-organize, or teams, software engineering teams are going to self-organize to a more smaller scale.
That's happening right now in the US, right? I mean, that's the trend. Like, I think we saw it in February somewhere, when Jack Dorsey announced the restructuring of the company, let's call it like that. And he also came to the conclusion that we need way smaller teams. Like we're entering this new era, and the bigger teams are not going to be efficient anymore. And we had Coinbase, of course, the same. Meta is going through the same right now. So there's this trend already in the US, and we're lagging a little bit in Europe, of course, where they see that they need to restructure and rethink the way of how teams are built, right?
Yeah.
Like our normal Scrum, what is it, like 7 minus or +2? That's not going to hold.
And already
longer.
without agents, that sometimes feels painful, right? If you get a big team, there's a lot of communication, everything goes slow, everybody has an opinion. But with the agents, it become just so much more of a problem if you have big teams. And smaller teams go way faster.
Yeah. But there's a big constraint, and that's that. It's maybe we need to have companies that will shift their strategy to becoming more of an agentic company, right? And that's currently not the case. Well, at least not at the companies that I've visited. And they need to embrace this in order for this to actually succeed, right? Yeah.
What does an agentic company look like to you?
Embracing this new way of developing software, at least, and not necessarily like putting AI in products, like being a proposition, but embracing the new ways of building and giving leeway to creativity and innovation through the use of agents, right? And LLMs. And that's a shift that needs to take place here in Europe, at least. It's the same when Agile was introduced, right? We were there in, when was it? I think 2006, 2007, that we saw the transition from Agile, and we were lagging a little bit behind the US. And those companies saw that, and the same will go here with embracing the whole LLMs for your business and trying to build something.
Yeah.
And that's a big enabler, but the companies need to change, right?
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
My assumption is that it's going to go beyond also engineering, because I feel like there's a lot of outdated workflows that can be automated, semi-automated, enabled, and amplified with agents as well.
Yeah.
And right now, engineers and kind of the technology side is really on the forefront, because we are engineering our own engineering workflows. And I think once we book success there, it will be funny to see how we can then engineer and orchestrate other workflows.
Yeah.
Maybe that's going to be the role. Maybe that's going to be the
responsibility. There's so much
responsibility.
opportunity in the mid-sized companies,
Right.
where they are really Excel-based. And they're too big for Excel, but too small to have development team fix that. I think there's so much opportunity there to fix a lot of that with AI.
Yeah.
And it's also getting rid of let's use the SRE word toil, right? Like a lot of people working in Excel, that's basically toil.
What's toil?
Toil. It's like the repetitive process that you don't want to do, right?
Oh, okay.
And can be probably eliminated away. Like that's the whole core reason for what Google called like the toil in software development and the operations part. But if we remove that toil for the other non-IT businesses, so to say, they can do a lot of other super interesting stuff, right? And I think there's great value there. Yeah.
Yeah, currently there's a lot of focus for developers, of course, right?
Yeah.
They use that to increase it for building these models themselves as well. But there's so much opportunity in business, I think. So, but they're maybe not always technical enough to make enough use of it. So I'm really interested to see how we can help there.
Yeah.
As final thought, we already mentioned that kind of everyday practice is incredibly important currently with the time that we have, as well as time might be limited and we don't know how limited. You two seem like people that really keep up to date with the technology that comes up, but also in experimenting. So from each of you, I'm quite curious, what would you recommend for people to start learning or start experimenting? What has worked for you so far?
Yeah, one of the things is just what Jeroen already said, right? The spark. If you find the spark, then finding the time is no longer your problem, because then you will find the time because you really, really want to.
What is that spark for you? Where does it come from?
I think it started already with the first ChatGPT, right? I thought, well, wow, this is really cool. That it can just spit out a whole algorithm just by one sentence. It doesn't work correctly immediately, but I already can see that this is quite powerful. And then it increased, it got better and better, integrated more and more into the IDE. Then we got the CLI tools. And the moment you could just talk to it and say, okay, I want just this simple bash script because I need this task. I have this task, write me the script. And it's like, here it is. And it worked. It was like, oh, wow. And then in your application, and it's like the oh fuck moment. It's like, oh fuck, it would take me 1 day to write this script. And this is just one prompt, and it immediately gives me this script. It doesn't work. I do it again. I give it the error, and then it fixed it. And next iteration, it solved itself and fixed itself. Like that was the moment, like, wow, what am I going to do in the future? So I want to jump on that train. I felt like that analogy, what you said, the marathon, in my thought was like a train's going. And I want to jump on that train, and I don't want to wave it goodbye when it just departs the station and I'm left behind. And it's like, sorry, you're no longer necessary because you don't know how to work with these kind of tools.
And people can still hop on?
Yes.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. I can tell you when my spark was born. So I was following the guys from SourceGraph because they were a Go shop and they were building interesting products. And they also dabbled in creating extensions for Visual Studio Code. It was first called Kodi. But then they also saw like the whole agents thing coming up. And for me, it was still like somewhere in 24, it was like, oh, agent. It was like a little bit of a marketing term for me. But then at one moment in time, I was using the new... No, AMP was still not there. I think it was Kodi still in Visual Studio Code. And I asked it to do something, and it was doing a lot of stuff for me. It was changing code. It it saw that I had specific tests. It ran the tests. It compiled the code, and this was something I haven't experienced before. And then I had to pick myself up from the ground because I was like, uh-oh. It was like the uh-oh moment. So that was when my spark was born. And then I think every day since, and now it's a little bit more slow in the industry, but the new developments kept on surprising us. Like every time. Like for instance, we had the same big uh-oh moment, the moment that we started using Pi, for instance, like as a whole different agent harness. And up until like yesterday, we were experiencing like the new goal instructions that apparently all the harnesses now are raving about. We had to, explore, okay, so what does this exactly mean, the whole goal stuff? And we, again, were very surprised by this. So yeah, that... it's like that spark, and then all the surprises that you will still get. That's very interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
But if you want one tip, I think it would be like in your everyday work, think every time, can I do this with the agent? Can I do this with the agent? And then try it. If it doesn't work, then you can always do it manually, but keep exploring, keep trying it. And if it doesn't work, think, okay, what did I do wrong? Because probably you did something wrong, right? It's probably your problem, not the model's problem. They're really good. But if you get that mindset, you find little nudges where you can say, okay, I want to try that. Let's see if the AI can do that for me.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, of course, that there's this sort of a famous example on X, when Boris Cherny also just simply forgot to actually use Cloud Code, which he built himself, of course. It's like, oh yeah, I can. Oh yeah, sure. He was in a very difficult debugging. He was debugging a problem, and it was taking him quite a long time. He said, oh, why shouldn't I just ask Cloud Code, like fix this for me or debug this for me? So yeah, that was an interesting observation. Yes.
The robot is always invited.
Yes.
Stuff like that.
Yes.
Guys, thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
Thank you.
This was a lot of fun.
Yes.
Yeah, really.
Thank you.
Cool. That's it.